The first session, we had a wonderful panel of people who are in the ground, close to the ground, producing electrons. Our second session now is going to be a series of 3 pitches from new companies looking at new ideas. So we're going to start off first with Brian, who's going to be talking a little bit about a new way to do power production in a wellbore. So with this, Brian.
Awesome. Hello, everyone. Everybody can hear me all right? Can I get some thumbs up from the audience? Perfect. Thank you. So I am lucky enough to follow the great panel we just had, and I don't have to go over all the issues that geothermal has. We can talk about some positive things and our new technology. I'm also from Saskatchewan. I think that's important to note. It seems like most of the panel was today. So maybe there's a correlation between people from Saskatchewan and crazy entrepreneurs. But yeah, I look forward to sharing some stuff we're going to go over today. So as Lisa, Kirsten, and Jeff had mentioned, geothermal is amazing, but right now it falls short on the global energy scale. And we're going to give my take on what we can do to maybe change that today. So every type of geothermal, be it AGS or EGS, all generates power on surface. And like Lisa had mentioned, it's hard to move heat over long distances. Well, if we have to move the heat from 3.5 kilometers underground to surface, that also has some energy loss there as well. So we have flipped geothermal on its head, and we have put our turbine, our power generation equipment, inside the wellbore. And we are generating electricity almost like a hydro dam with the liquid flowing down. And then that fluid is harvested, or that fluid is vaporized, turns into a gas with the geothermal energy, and that comes to surface. So what we're doing is having a different optimization function in geothermal. So looking at it from a different light. So when my co-founder pitched Geogen as a scarred reservoir engineer in oil and gas, he said it was closed loop, and I said thank you. So I don't have to deal with the open loop issues of toxic brines and kind of what Jeff was alluding to with the optimization for closed loop technologies. And I can go over all the competitive advantages we have, but really what it boils down to is us getting to a target of 5 cents per LCOE. And that's going to allow geothermal to be scalable all over the world and at different temperatures than above 120 Celsius as well. So here's a temperature map at 3.5 kilometers into the ground. So you'll notice I've had to circle it and zoom it in. But 10% of the world's geothermal comes from that one spot, that one orange speck, right? That obviously doesn't exist everywhere. And like Roman said, we don't have volcanoes everywhere and can't do typical geothermal. So with our technology, we can target the yellow areas. We can target temperatures from 80 to 120 Celsius to make economic electricity without astronomical advances in drilling technology to get to these deep, hot, either open loop or closed loop systems. So the nice thing that, again, my panelists have presented to everybody for me is the advancements in oil and gas, and not only the assets of people, but the assets of the wells. So because all of our technology is inside the wellbore, we can develop this, commercialize this inside wells that already exist, which allows us to do this much cheaper early time to get to that global goal of solving the world's energy problems and drilling geothermal all over the world. So short term, there's hundreds of thousands of wells that this technology is applicable to. And we're drilling about, in Canada and the US, they're drilling about 10,000 of these types of wells. We're going to call them Geogen wells every year to produce oil and gas for the first 10 to 15 years of their life, and then geothermal electricity. So we'll be executing our first project by the end of this year, and we'll be demonstrating downhole power. And really our focus is the process and the system to maximize the amount of heat that we can harvest in these types of wells. We've gotten amazing support from a few accelerators. I know Jeff had mentioned the value of mentorship early on, and this isn't my first company, and I'm crazy enough that it won't be my last, but we've had support from Hatch out of the entrepreneurship at UBC, CDL here in Calgary, and the Rice Clean Energy Alliance in Houston. And then we've gotten some support from Sumitomo as well. And we've gotten our process third-party validated by Seifer Technologies, who are world-renowned experts in thermal wellbore modeling, as well as Exergy Solutions. startup here in Calgary to do some of our surface prototyping. So yeah, that's the presentation. I wanted to say a big shout out. We actually have office space on the other side of this building at the Energy Transition Center here in Calgary, who are leading this energy transition, and as well as to Geothermal Canada, Lisa, Ever, Fervo, every other geothermal company deep in the space that we're that have led the way for geothermal here in Canada and across the world. So thank you very much.
All right, and we have a few minutes for some audience questions. So I have the mic. Questions. So as people think, what are you expecting for potential energy efficiency out of the system? How does it compare with an existing, let's say, ORC?
So how does it compare? So we have a different optimization equation. So everyone else is focused on getting the hottest fluid to surface. That is not our optimization because our electricity generation is downhole. So while if you compare the surface temperature inlet versus outlet, it's lower, but that's not our optimization equation. So we obviously at 80 to 120 Celsius aren't promising 2 megawatts per well, right? We're promising between 100 and 150 kilowatts per well. But if you don't have the drilling cost, that can be economic.
So you talked about being able to potentially put this as a retrofit down end of life hydrocarbon wells here in Alberta and Saskatchewan. What kind of wellbore diameters does your technology fit inside?
The bigger, the better. But we have built this technology to work inside your typical 4.5-inch wellbore in Canada. And obviously the US, we have larger wellbores is the norm. So
quickly, could Phil go talk to AV quickly? Next presenter. All right, Lisa.
If you could dream, how fast do you think this is commercial and in the market? Because that's the hard part.
Yeah, for sure. Hopefully we don't have any issues with our first project and it goes smoothly. We are leveraging off-the-shelf technology for our initial implementation, so that's positive. But there needs to be efficiency gained in many part of the systems, and those are things we're already searching for. So we're aiming to be commercial in 2 years, 2 to 3 years. Yeah.
Best of luck.
Yeah.
And as a brief shout out, I know that Phil's team is working with the UFC capstone project right now to try and push this forward. So great way of getting students involved in order to try drive this technology forward. Other questions? Time for one more.
You can ask me after as well. We'll be here, myself and my co-founder. So look forward to questions then.
Oh, wait.
Chris Hawks, Baker Hughes.
Yeah.
Have you taken into consideration cleaning up and converting these old wells, or are you looking at drilled incomplete wells? What have you factored in that cost, or are you expecting the previous producer to handle that?
It depends on the relationship. We'd be fine. Ducts are the best ones because those are already sealed. But our system does account for converting the well. And yeah, that's a commercial agreement if they want to convert the well or if we want to long term. But yeah, that's something we're looking at with different producers.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So Brian, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Our next presenter is going to be, go there. Next presenter is Phil Harris from Fourth Resource. So I think, go for it.
Hey, can everyone hear me? All right. Thanks so much for giving me the opportunity to talk. As Roman introduced me, I'm Phil Harms, founder of Fourth Resource Corp. We are, my slides are funny. So I'll be making some predictions of the future here. So just to make sure that I'm safe from lawyers, that's my slide. There we go. So Fourth Resource is a Canadian geothermal development company, and we're pursuing world-class, underdeveloped, high-potential geothermal resources. So we're optimizing a little bit differently than what a lot of the previous presenters are. We're going to the resource where it's hottest and highest potential. So we're trying to develop impactful energy projects, minimizing the footprint on the ecosystem and uplifting the communities where we operate. And we're also trying to bring a lot of this technology experience from the oil and gas sector in the great city of Calgary and our surrounding colleagues here to really optimize and bring technology to places that don't look at things the same way. So our initial focus is in the East Africa Rift system. The reason we'll go there, I'll explain shortly. It's because the resource is there. And we're building a portfolio of projects, sort of like, an oil and gas startup. You spread your risk across multiple projects and you can get your risk reduction properly there. So we've identified several projects in the region, but our flagship project is in Ethiopia, where we see the best mix of resource and infrastructure and demand. So the East Africa Rift is a huge system, thousands of kilometers long, that basically the continent of Africa is splitting into by plate tectonics, and you've got this big heat upwelling area. And there's basically a string of volcanoes. At the northern end, there's actually what's called the Afar Triangle, which is a triple junction between 3 plates, and it's a very thinned crust area, so it represents a very high heat flow portion of the planet. So Ethiopia is very underdeveloped. They've got 7 megawatts of geothermal power total. Kenya, just to the south, they're one of the world leaders in geothermal, and they get about almost 50% of their power from geothermal on that same rift fairway. So why do we go to Ethiopia? It's very underdeveloped, very underexplored. There's a few projects that are trying to get off the ground there. There's some operators that have just drilled some wells, a little bit of success. The local government has the 7 megawatt project that they're currently upgrading to a 70 megawatt project, but that's it. There's not very many foreign companies in there. There's not very much big technology coming in and bringing that piece to the table. So the population of Ethiopia is 104 million people, and based on the demographic, it's growing very, very fast. So they need energy. And they have a clear regulatory framework for geothermal energy. So we see a good fit for a big opportunity for a private developer to come in and develop geothermal resources. So our project, and sorry, my slides got a little messed up, is in northern Ethiopia, right in the Afar Triangle, in that thinned crust area. Last year, we acquired a geothermal reconnaissance license covering 2,000 square kilometers in the Afar Triangle, in that thinned crust area. Within that thin crust, there's actually a pre-existing Jurassic sedimentary basin. So you've got this sedimentary rock, which we know and love here in Alberta because it's full of reservoirs and permeability that you can produce fluids from. And it's in the thinned crust where you have lots of heat. So we've sort of found this sweet spot where we can kind of optimize heat and reservoir. Because we've got this sedimentary basin, we think this is a scalable resource. And we can use some of these techniques like unconventional drilling, where you have multiple pads, repeat and drive down your drilling costs. So we think it's a scalable resource in that way. As far as developability, Ethiopia actually is reasonably infrastructure rich. There's a lot being built there. Right in our block, there's 2 high voltage power lines. There's a road. I was there just in May doing field geology, and you drive down the highway and get to where you need. It's really easy to get around. This side of Ethiopia is safe. If you follow the news, there's some issues in other parts of Ethiopia. But here we've got very good relations with the local populations, and they're very supportive of what we're trying to do. So I mentioned the power lines. I mentioned the highway. There's a city called Dredawa right on the corner of our block. That's kind of like a growing industrial base. They're building all sorts of industrial parks there. It's a tax-free zone where they're trying to grow the industry for Ethiopia and kind of follow this manufacturing model that developing countries follow to, bring their populations up into the, middle class. So the analogy that I like to point to is actually Nevada, or, the basin and range in Western US. What makes that work for a geothermal play is it's this thinned crust. You've got these rotated fault blocks, you've got hot, high heat flow, and they're mostly these fault hosted plays. But there's a long history there of geothermal development, lots of plants that have been around for 40, 50 years that are still producing today. And in the Afar, you've got the thinned crust, you've got extensional stress, you've got fault systems, but it's totally underexplored. So we've basically got a Nevada that nobody's really looking at and nobody's touched for a geothermal development. So what makes our play special? Numerous play types. So we've got the faults. There are some volcanic components to it. Pure sedimentary basin play, the scalable and repeatable play concepts, the thick sedimentary basin with porosity, permeability, intersecting fracture sets, and there's some recent magmatism in the last few 100,000 years that we've found. As far as developability, the power demand there we see as basically unlimited. Where we're developing, there's not very many people that actually live. There's sort of a kind of nomadic population there. And with the small footprint that we'll be using for exploration and building, we're not going to be, displacing huge amounts of people or farmland or anything like that. We've got transmission. Ethiopia actually is mostly hydropower, but most of that hydro generation is on the other side of the country. So there's a big gap for power generation on this side of the country. Dre Dawa is full of hotels. It's got an international airport. It's got logistics. So we can really operate effectively there. And then the community. So, we're there. We're trying to add value to people's lives. So by developing geothermal in Ethiopia, we'll be providing sustainable energy to people that actually need energy the most. In addition to electrical power generation, we're also going to be developing heat projects and direct use for food production, job creation, that sort of thing. And we're committed to, bringing those communities along with us. So that's our commitment. There's lots of opportunity for us to make a huge impact in developing energy there. And then once we sort of get this model off the ground and going, we've got numerous other projects that we've already kind of identified that we'll be pursuing. So thanks for giving me the time. Again, I'm Phil Harms from Fourth Resource. And I guess if we have time for a few questions.
All right. Questions from the audience? I'll just start off with one quick one. So what's the big difference between trying to do, say, geothermal project here in Alberta versus down in Ethiopia? Like the biggest difference?
Well, I was up till 5:30 this morning because of the time zone. So that's one part. I think where we're focused is on the resource. Where Alberta is focused and Canada is the data. So the real asset here is, the resource, it's lower temperature, but about it. You don't have to explore for it. Whereas we're exploring for resources there. This is frontier exploration and we're trying to de-risk, but, it's there. It's high temperature. Our geothermometry's coming out at 220, 250 degrees. There's a hot spring right in the middle of our block. It's 84 degrees. So the heat's there. It's just a matter of getting it out of the ground and developed onto the grid.
Hey, Phil.
Hey, Jeff.
So as we talked about a lot in the panel, the funding is a big problem. Are you seeing that there's like World Bank or some groups in Africa that are sort of helping support this and that there's funding opportunities or funding support for your project? There's
lots of talk, I would say. there are lots of grants that are geared towards geothermal development projects. What I'm finding is probably one of the most frustrating things is that funding tends to be linked to technology. So a lot of these grants and funds, they want to fund technology, proprietary, technology so that they can grow it. Whereas I think the best value is to just start putting projects in the ground and fund projects and then have that project fund the next project. And that's a different growth trajectory. But I'm finding that the grant funding and the World Bank funding sees it a little bit differently. So that's one of the big challenges that we're coming up against, actually.
Hi, thanks for the presentation, Phil. Scott Hess at the University of Calgary. I was just wondering, as far as like the existing industry there, some of the speakers before talked about, there's the drillers and the equipment's here, and there's a lot of synergies that can happen with having that locally. What is the industry like there as far as when you are moving forward with going into exploration drilling, and is there kind of more of an established industry there? That I know they're doing some geothermal drilling there, but is there rig availability? Like, do you see that as a challenge, or is that going to be something that has a line of sight?
Yeah, for sure. So that was one of our big actually draws to Ethiopia. Is there are 3 companies that have sort of blazed the trail. There's one rig that's kind of being used right now by a private company, and the Ethiopian government has actually purchased 2 rigs that are in country. There was a 4th rig that was supposed to be coming in, but it's in hiatus right now. I'm actually not sure what the status is. The problem is those are all massive rigs. So we're going to be probably bringing in a smaller kind of slim hole rig for our first wells and exploring that way. And since it's sort of remote, you're bringing all that stuff in, you need redundancies. So your first operations are higher cost just because of that. But then you kind of get those efficiencies as you go forward and develop. But the fact that there are a few there, Kenya's right next door. They've got a pile of activity in geothermal. We're right next to the Djibouti port. There's 2 other ports that are kind of connected to our block. So we see that as a challenge, but a solvable challenge.
Any further questions? Wait till the coffee break afterwards. So hold that thought. All right. So Phil, thank you again.
Thanks so much.
All right. So for the third presentation, the third presenter is going to be remote. So Nick DePresido from E2E Solutions is going to be on video Zoom. There's a little bit of a miscommunication earlier this morning. Don't worry about it. We'll still make this work. So over to you, Nick.
What is the biggest challenge facing global energy security today? Ironically, it's the energy transition itself. I am Domenico Nick DePresido, the president and CEO of E2E Energy Solutions, a Calgary-based geothermal company focused on developing new sustainable EGS and AGS systems. How do we produce the energy we need today while transitioning to the renewable energy of tomorrow? E2E has the answer with its enhanced geothermal reservoir recovery system. We'll now share a short video of the EGRRS process.
E2E Energy Solutions strives to design and develop economical solutions for a sustainable net zero carbon future, using its patent-pending process, Enhanced Geothermal Reservoir Recovery System. E2E's EGRRS process targets qualifying producing and non-producing oil and gas reservoirs, and converts them into large-scale geothermal power plants, capable of generating 50 to 100 megawatts. Two to 4 wells are selected within 4 kilometers from each other. The wellhead is removed off of the first injection well, and the directional drilling rig is set up. The wellbore is then re-entered and drilled down, to and through the reservoir, continuing to a depth that yields temperatures above 200 degrees Celsius. Once the desired depth has been reached, the drilling is then turned and continued to a central location where the recovery well will be located. The drill is then removed and the perforated pipe is installed in the horizontal zone. Once the perforated pipe is installed, the formation is hydraulically fractured. A second conduit is then installed in the wellbore and connected to the first. The portion of the conduit passing through the reservoir is designed to enhance gas liberation from the reservoir brine, which can then be recovered at the wellhead. With the gas removed from the brine, the hot fluid flows down the conduit to the fractured zone to complete the first injection well. The same process is then replicated at the second well and any additional injection wells that may be used. After all the injection wells have been completed, a recovery well is strategically located at a central location and drilled to the same depth as the injection well. Multiple horizontal legs are then drilled from the central recovery well, intersecting the fractured zones of the injection legs. The perforated horizontal recovery conduits are then installed, intersecting the injection legs fract zone. The recovery legs are then fractured, creating a deep earth radiator at temperatures of 200 degrees Celsius or higher. As the hot reservoir brine passes through the gas recovery conduit in the reservoir, the trapped gases are liberated from the reservoir brine, which then travel up the conduit to the wellhead, where they are recovered. The remaining hot brine flows down the injection conduit to the created deep earth radiator. The hot brine then slowly flows through the fractures, where the temperature is upgraded to greater than 200 degrees Celsius and is recovered by the injection legs and brought to the surface. At the surface, the hot brine is passed through a separator, where it flashes into steam. The steam is then used to drive a turbine to generate electricity. The condensed steam and water are then treated and sent to the hydrogen electrolysis process. A concentrated brine is created after the steam is separated from the reservoir brine. This concentrated brine is then treated and sent to the lithium extraction process. The recovered natural gas from each injection well can be sold directly to market or reformed efficiently into hydrogen, utilizing the produced steam and generated electricity to power the SMR plus carbon capture process. The heat recovered from the lithium and electrolysis process, combined with the electricity and clean water produced from the geothermal power plant, can be used to heat and power sustainable greenhouses. The produced green electricity can also be used to power energy-intensive AI and cryptocurrency mining. The remaining water and any carbon produced are treated and re-injected back into the reservoir, away from the production zone. E2E Energy Solutions, with its economics-first approach to renewable energy, creates green energy projects with economics that make sense.
Happy to take any questions that there may be. Hello, I would be happy to take any questions. We're just getting ready right now for our pilot. We're looking to be working on it in the first quarter of 2024 here in Alberta, in partnership with an oil and gas producer.
Are being rolled into that, and have you had, I guess, struggles with getting all these different representatives of different technologies and resources to communicate and find common ground on how this, works going forward, or is it just you're driving it and there's people jumping in, or how's that working?
Our technology is all upstream. So anything on the surface, we're just providing examples of how we can use the power in remote locations. A lot of the oil and gas sites that we're looking at, they have poor or no grid access. And also we're trying to show examples of what we can do. And we would partner with existing off-the-shelf technologies.
Other questions? Yeah, this is a great example of trying to combine different value streams to really drive those economics.
Yeah, Bob Pearson. To ensure the effective frac hits, do you have to frac the injector and producer simultaneously, or in very quick succession to guarantee that frac hit?
Yeah, that's what we're targeting, is to fracture both. I'm using a multi-stage fracturing technology, both the injection and the producer, to get them to intersect and communicate.
One or two more. Yes. Any other questions? All right. I know that for the folks that in person, we had a slight glitch with the video early on, but the folks online, I think, saw the whole thing. So apologies on that for the in-person people. Nick is around and is Calgary based. So if you have more additional questions for him, please reach out. I do believe there's more people from the E2E team here. If you can wave your hands. There you go, Mac in the corner. So if you have more questions, please over the coffee break, just go ahead and reach out.